Danny Boyle doesn't go for the obvious picks. His favorite films include a classic band in the US, a stop-motion train chase that outdoes Apocalypse Now, and a Gene Hackman thriller so violent it got buried by the studio. Eureka is one of those movies that had everything going for it. Gene Hackman, Mickey Rourke, Nicholas Roeg directing, but it completely tanked. MGM didn't know how to market it, the MPAA slapped it with an X rating for extreme violence, and by the time it finally limped into theaters, it made less than $200,000 off of a budget of $11 million. Just a total disaster. And audiences didn't care. Even Terry Gilliam, who you'd think would be into something this weird and ambitious, absolutely hated it. He actually walked out of the theater. He straight up said, "I've blocked it from my mind. I got up and walked out because I was like, you're wasting too much of my life." That's how much he disliked it. Boyle, on the other hand, sees it completely differently. He actually put Eureka on his list of the 5 best films ever made. He called Roeg his favorite British filmmaker and said Eureka might have been the film that ended Roeg's American career. "The first half of this movie is as good as you'll ever get," he said, and Hackman's never been better. For Danny Boyle, there's one film that always sits at the top of his list: Apocalypse Now. Always number 1 every time. And the way he puts it, this movie is the ultimate action film. Not just because of the spectacle, but because of the way it moves. Boyle once said, "Every time it stops moving, it's weird and unnatural and disturbing." And yeah, Apocalypse Now is one of the greatest war films of all time. But making it was actual hell. The shoot was only supposed to last 4 months. It stretched to 236 days. Cast members dropped out, others nearly died. Typhoons wiped out entire sets. The budget exploded. The payroll was stolen. The studio nearly pulled the plug multiple times. By the time the movie finally wrapped, it was 6 weeks behind schedule and millions over budget. Coppola had to take out a massive loan, personally guaranteeing the film would make at least $40 million in distributor rentals, or else he'd be paying for it out of his own pocket. Boyle also makes this great point. Most period films, no matter how good, eventually get this praise like, even after 25 years, it still holds up. Not Apocalypse Now. Nobody ever says that because it doesn't need to hold up. You put it on and all you can say is, wow. You can't talk about Italian cinema without talking about Bicycle Thieves. It captures the brutal reality of post-war Italy like nothing else. It's heartbreaking. A father desperate to get his stolen bike back so he can keep his job with his young son watching his every move. Boyle absolutely loves it. Though he's got one little confession, he didn't actually watch it until Slumdog Millionaire blew up in Italy. He was promoting the movie, and everyone there loved it, but he felt guilty because he'd never seen Bicycle Thieves. So, the very next Saturday, he went out, got a copy, and finally watched it. He later said, "Do not be put off by the fact it's black and white, or in Italian. It is the most beautiful film about a father and a son that I've ever seen." And he's not alone. Scorsese worships this movie. He's talked about how those Italian were more than cinema to him, a form of truth that I related to. Despite being considered one of the greatest films ever made, Bicycle Thieves actually got banned in the US in 1950. The MPAA shut it down because of a scene inside a brothel, which apparently strayed too far from good conservative values. But obviously, that didn't stop it from becoming a foundational film in cinema history. Danny Boyle is a huge fan of animation, and when he talks about great action sequences, he's not pointing to Apocalypse Now or some massive Hollywood blockbuster. He's talking about a Wallace and Gromit short by Nick Park. He once said that the train chase at the end of this movie is better than anything in Coppola's masterpiece. Park himself is one of those guys who stuck to his vision, never sold out, and built something legendary. Boyle actually said that if Park wasn't only interested in doing claymation, they'd have him doing every action movie. The Wrong Trousers is one of the greatest stop-motion films ever made. It won an Oscar back in the 90s for Best Animated Short, And decades later, the Wallace and Gromit franchise is still going strong. In fact, the newest Wallace and Gromit movie is about to compete for Best Animated Feature at the Academy Awards. And this film's influence is everywhere. The Toy Story filmmakers have actually said that the moving van chase at the end of Toy Story was directly inspired by the toy train chase in The Wrong Trousers. The Pixar animators saw what Nick Park did here and basically went, okay, that's the standard, we have to top that. Boyle calls this the best film he's ever seen about children, and not in the way people usually talk about kids' movies. He says it's a very adult film because it takes kids seriously. Louis Malle based the film on his own childhood experience. Set during World War II, it follows 3 Jewish boys hiding in a French boarding school. The headmaster risks everything to keep them safe. But the movie doesn't shy away from the cruelty of the Nazi regime, and what unfolds is devastating. Boyle, who's worked with kids in Slumdog Millionaire and Millions, knows how hard it is to get child actors to all feel like they belong in the same movie. And in this movie, every kid is in sync. That's what makes it so powerful. Boyle calls it one of the saddest, most moving, most genuine films he's ever seen.